Hi everyone, it's Nick. Welcome back to my channel. Okay, I was scrolling through Instagram Reels the other day, as I tend to do, and I came across an interior designer that was absolutely hating on peel and stick tile. And I thought to myself, I was like, are interior designers snobs? And if you're an interior designer watching this, you're probably like, no, that's such an insult. And then you're like, well, guilty. You know, interior designers have a reputation of being snobs. So do architects and all the rest. And people sort of in this sort of design housing sort of space tend to be known as being quite snobby. And I wanted to talk a little bit in this video about why that is, because I think from my vantage point, I've got kind of a perspective on why they're perceived as snobs and why maybe they kind of are. And also I was gonna share sort of 5 areas that I think interior designers tend to be really snobby about, things that they don't really like, that I personally think are okay and fine for most people to have in their home. Okay, so let's ruffle a few feathers and talk about that. Okay, so first, let's talk about why interior designers maybe are snobs. You know, let's talk about the business model of an interior designer for a quick hot second. Interior designers are running a professional services firm. Now that is different than someone like me who tends to talk about IKEA, and I talk about peel and stick sometimes, and like I talk about those little accessible solutions, because in the end, I, along with other YouTubers, we're more of like a media sort of personality, right? So we're very different. We're trying to appeal to a very mass audience. We are trying to appeal to, you know, we're after those views, and it's a different business, right? So you're more likely to see DIY content on YouTube, IKEA top 10s, right? Things like that content on YouTube amongst content creators, while interior designers that may be on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube as well, where their business lies is in professional services. They are trying to get people to purchase their services for their, you know, they might be an independent or they might have their own agency. And so, you know, we have to think for a second, who is really that interior designer's customer? Who are they trying to attract? And they're oftentimes trying to attract people that are wealthier than average. And that is because if you're already trying to take on a very expensive renovation or a new build project, it's already very expensive. For you to add on the additional services of hiring someone to project manage and come up with the design and execution and all of that is going to be also a big expense on top of an already expensive project. So who are interior designers trying to attract? Now, there are interior designers at different price point, right? If you want to hire Jake Arnold or Kelly Wearstler, they're obviously gonna be a lot more expensive than sort of other designers might be. So yes, there's a range of people and they all got slightly different businesses and different price points, but for the most part, they need to get paid for their time, and their time is valuable and their time is worth it. If you can afford an interior designer, honestly, it's amazing. You know, they project manage, they come up with a design, they execute, they do a lot. They do a lot for their money, but their services are customized and are expensive. So they need to sort of look and maybe dress and maybe act the part to attract a very, you know, wealthier than average sort of customer, which is also why you're going to see them not really so much talk about big box stores and IKEA and things that I talk about on my channel, because, you know, they are, how would you feel if you spent $25,000 on a design package and they were like, here you go, here's your IKEA kitchen, you know, with all your IKEA living room? Like, they're gonna maybe lean on some IKEA, for sure, fine, to find those little save points to fit in the budget. But for the most part, like, you would be disappointed too if everything they came up with and you ended up with an IKEA showroom, because what did you pay $25,000 for? You know what I mean? So keeping all that in mind, now I want to talk about 5 things that interior designers don't like that I think are perfectly fine. Okay, and the first one I want to talk about here is peel and stick tile, peel and stick wallpaper, peel and stick flooring, like tile things, whatever. Whether you're doing your backsplash in your kitchen or you're covering up some nasty old, you know, tile that you have in your bathroom of your rental or whatever, and you've got some peel and stick. I have heard a lot of interior designers don't like peel and stick, and I get it. Normally these things are made of vinyl. You know, you can tell they're not real. Some are good, some are better than others, let's be honest, but they don't like them. And some designers, of course, do, but you're probably not going to find a lot of interior designers that are going to actually scope out a peel and stick option for people's homes. Maybe some wallpaper, that can be fine, but for the most part, they're probably not going to do it. But you see it so popular here on social media, again, amongst YouTubers and Instagram, and you got the Alexandra Gators, and she's out there and she's doing all of her peel and stick stuff. And like, you kind of go, okay, well, they're doing it, but why are these designers such snobs and they hate on it so much? It's because they're not going to quote it for like any of their projects. They're probably not going to put this on their spec sheet. Like, that's just probably not going to happen. But I think these are overall, these designers, although I get it, because again, their business, I think they're kind of missing the fact that for most people, especially renters, people in temporary spaces, they just don't have the option of doing a complete renovation, because a complete renovation is very, very expensive, and you either can't do it because you're in a rental, or you don't want to do it, or you can't afford it because it's expensive and time consuming and renovations suck. So I think that a peel and stick option is fine if you're in that situation. Just go in with your eyes wide open that it's not the same thing, right? Obviously, going and picking out a beautiful marble hexagon tile for your backsplash is not the same as going to Home Depot and getting a peel and stick. It's just not. And so long as we know that going in, I think it's perfectly acceptable to cover up the ugly, which is what I say, you know, like you got some ugly tile in your kitchen that you've had since 1992 and you can't really change it out, or you don't really want to, or you can't afford it. You know what? Peel and stick covers it up, and it's a step in the right direction. So yes, interior designers generally are kind of snobby and don't like it in general, but I think it's perfectly acceptable in the right circumstances, so long as you know what you're getting. Okay, next up is going to be used items. And sort of also I'm gonna include in this what you do with those used items, because that's also a source of sort of snobbery. Okay, let's talk about it. Okay, used items, whether it's Facebook Marketplace, whatever. So as I have mentioned on many trends lists and things, vintage and used items has been gaining in popularity. A lot of that is because you just can't find a lot of the new stuff because of supply chain shortages due to the pandemic, which is loosening up, to be honest, at this point in 2024, but also just, you know, people are looking for lived in places with character, you know, traditional making a comeback. Like there's lots of reasons why vintage and used items have been gaining popularity. Now, designers, I will say there's been definitely a movement in the last several years. I've seen interior designers using vintage pieces and things in their projects and loving a vintage lamp moment and whatever. So we are seeing those sort of used and vintage pieces being brought in, so that snobbery has loosened. But I also want to say that we all love the idea of getting like a 1945 Danish like credenza that we just found, or some like random chair that we found on Facebook Marketplace that's like from 1950s Copenhagen. But let's be real, a lot of the stuff we see on Facebook Marketplace is a 1990s dresser from Home Depot. And that's actually what a lot of people are picking up from Facebook Marketplace. We all want to stumble on some beautiful vintage find, but that's just, I don't know what Facebook Marketplace you're in, but it ain't mine. And so sometimes I think you're just seeing a lot of like 90s and 2000s stuff that people are just getting rid of now because it's 20 years old. So these are not some timeless vintage pieces. That stuff tends to get a lot less love, I think, than those timeless old classics from Copenhagen. And so what do people do with those things? Well, you know what? If the vinyl's being stripped off and they're painting them and they're refinishing them and I'm seeing a lot of people that hate on those things. Now, I have gone on record that I'm also a snob and hate sort of chippy paint farmhousey things. So I do think there's a way that you can do it in a way that looks nicer than others. Some of it, the fake distressing, I'm not personally a fan of, just my own perspective. But you know what? People are getting those old 90s dressers, and sometimes that's what you gotta work with. And you can style it with a beautiful vignette, you can mix it into your space, you can paint it, you can swap out the hardware, you know, you might even use some contact paper if it's like really banged up on the top. There are things that you can do to take some of those not so awesome Facebook Marketplace finds and turn them into something special and a little bit more uniquely your own. So that's the stuff that I think gets a lot less love, and I think is also just more of the reality of what you see from most people. Okay, next up is going to be dupes. Dupes. So let's talk about it. Dupes are something that also a lot of designers tend to be kind of snobby about. I've even myself, because I have recommended or talked about dupes sometimes on this channel, and I've had interior designers that have said to me, like, you shouldn't recommend dupes because you should only recommend people have the real thing, and that they should go find these either vintage pieces or even brand new pieces that are designer pieces. I can understand the rewarding and making sure that the designer gets the respect they deserve. It sucks to be able to create work and then find out that a whole bunch of other big box stores have sort of ripped you off. I especially understand that also if you're a smaller company that is trying to get off the ground and do something really, really cool. I understand that. That makes a lot of sense. But I also think that there are some luxury retailers, like Restoration Hardware considers themselves a luxury retailer. Their price point most certainly seems it, that are honestly doing kind of fine. There is still going to always be a market out there, I think, for people that want the real thing. And that's fine. I think that exists out there, but there's sort of some snobbery around promoting fakes and promoting dupes that I think doesn't always acknowledge the fact that a lot of people are just never ever going to afford something from Restoration Hardware. And you know what? For a lot of people, a $20,000 couch from Restoration Hardware is not just like not in their price range, it's never gonna happen. Like, it's just never gonna happen, right? Like, a lot of people make $60,000 a year, and the idea of spending $20,000 on a couch is not going to happen. I'm gonna say it again, not gonna happen. So if they can find a $5,000 dupe, that's still expensive, and it's still hard, but they want the look, and they just can't afford to get necessarily the designer find. I think there are companies out there that are doing a good job of reproducing some of this work or making some modifications, and they're inspired by, but not necessarily directly copying. And they're providing it at a price point that I think is more accessible to more people. And I overall think that that is generally fine. I will also say that we need to go and be really clear on, you know, if you are going for the dupe, there's going to be some compromises. So, you know, if you're comfortable with that, that's okay. They might be using cheaper fabrics. They're probably using, you know, the construction might not be as great. They might be using plywood instead of, you know, kiln dried wood for their couches or whatever. Like, there's going to be some differences there in the quality of the materials that are used. And so long as you know that going in, then I think that that's okay. There is still going to be a market for designer finds out there. The designers are still going to be able to source amazing, fabulous couches for their clients, and that's a wonderful thing. But I think for other people, I think it's great that they still have some options that are inspired by designer work, but not necessarily the real thing, so to speak. I think that's okay. Okay, next up, let's talk about laminate countertops. So laminate, okay, we talk a lot about, I love natural stone. Y'all know that, of course I do. We all love it. We all want those dream marble countertops, or maybe it's granite for you, or it's quartzite, or it's soapstone, or whatever, like, or who knows what your favorite is, and that's great for you. But like, we all have the dream, but truthfully, it's expensive, and kitchen renovations are expensive, and people aren't doing them that often for a reason, because they're annoying to do, because you probably only have one kitchen, which means if you're renovating that kitchen, it's horrible. If you've lived through a kitchen renovation and you've made, I don't know, you know, chili in an Instant Pot in your bathroom, you know what it's like to go through a kitchen renovation. They suck. And so not everybody can move into an Airbnb for 6 months, right? So you're gonna have to just sort of make do with what you're working with. Kitchen renovations suck. They're also incredibly expensive. And the idea that you're replacing your countertops with the latest and greatest marble is just not necessarily gonna happen. And this is where laminate, I think, makes sense for a lot of people. That if you're already going through the pain of a kitchen renovation, the idea that you're just gonna be, like, it sucks if you can't replace it with natural stone, I just think is just not accessible to most people. Laminate can be a really great option, I think. I personally, if I were to give you my advice, you didn't ask for it, but here it is, you're at the channel anyway, so I guess I'm gonna give it to you. I would stick to ones that are like a plain color, like go with plain like gray or white or black or whatever sort of color you wanna choose in your laminate. I personally think that choosing a more, you know, a basic color, as opposed to laminate that's trying to pretend to be marble. That is my own personal preference. I would say don't try to get laminate to fake stone. Be proud of your laminate. You know what? A kitchen renovation, as I said, is expensive and annoying. So if you end up with laminate and you're happy with it, then enjoy it, and like, good for you. You don't need to necessarily buy into the snobbery that if you don't get into natural stone, then you're obviously, it's not worth it, or your kitchen sucks. Because you can make a beautiful kitchen with laminate. I'm just gonna say it. There's some beautiful ones out there. Butcher block is another great option. You know, if you're comfortable with that and that fits into your look or whatever, go nuts. But you know what? You might not have the latest and greatest natural stone, but it's beautiful and gorgeous, and you should be proud of it. And I do still think that there's a lot of snobbery. I understand we all love a good natural stone. I'm not saying I don't, but there's a reason, again, I think, why designers want natural stone, because again, if you paid $30,000 for their work or whatever, and they recommended laminate to you, you'd also probably fire a designer. So I get why they're kind of snobs. That's the point of this video. Why are they snobs? Because, and I mean that in the nicest possible way, designers, I'm sorry. You know, it is for a reason. It's for a reason, and I think this is why. But, you know, separate that out and realize what works for you, and if it's laminate, go for it. Okay, and then let's just talk about the other one, which of course is big box stores. So we're talking Home Depot, we're talking IKEA, we're talking Target. Designers love to kind of talk about how, you know, it sucks that everything's at a big box store. I myself go after Home Goods, HomeSense all the time because I don't like it. That's the that's the reason why. But there are big box stores that I do like. You know, I just think sometimes designers, everybody wants custom, custom, custom. And there's a reason, again, because they're trying to impress their very fancy clients. And fancy clients want custom because that's what they paid them for. So yes, if they can install a beautiful, gorgeous custom banquette, we love that for them. But that might not make sense for most people because they're not hiring an interior designer. They wouldn't know where to start to build that banquette. So that's reality. So where are they gonna go? They're gonna go to a big box store. And that is why I think this is probably one of the biggest differentiators, the biggest difference between an interior designer and a YouTuber, media personality, because media is trying to appeal to the masses, and this is where big box stores are really important because they're accessible to people. Everybody's got a Home Depot fairly close to them. Everybody has kind of an IKEA, unless you live in New Zealand. What, does New Zealand have an IKEA? Because you guys are really vocal in the comment section about how you don't have one. So let me know, Kiwis, do you guys have one yet? I hope you do. And then you got designers, and designers, you know, they sit there and talk about designery things, and they sit there and love to talk about custom and small brands and vintage finds and they love all that. Custom. They're big fans. I get it. But again, that really speaks to the nature of who their client is and who they need to impress and who they need to make happy. And that is not you, average viewer on this channel, but is instead that very specific client that has hired them for a very specific purpose. And that is, I think, the biggest difference. Now, designers, I will say, for budget reasons, because clients, you know, they're not fancy, they don't have unlimited budgets usually. I mean, designers will tell you absolutely that their clients have budgets. But the simple fact that they've hired a designer, I mean, they're probably making a little bit more than your average person, I believe, probably. So they will, for budget reasons, shop at some big box stores, but they'll usually mix them in. They'll usually mix them in with other things, with some sort of custom solutions and things that may work for them along the way. So you will see some Target and stuff probably spec'd in some of their work, but probably not nearly as much as most people, which is everything they do. So that's obviously going to be a bit of a difference there. Now, there, of course, I should also recognize there's designers here on YouTube as well, and they do both, and they're kind of bridging both businesses. And listen, I mean, I don't know how they do it. I'm gonna be honest. I'm assuming they have a team, because it's not easy to be a media YouTuber person and also be a working interior designer and managing clients, and oh my gosh, that seems insane. I don't know how they do it all, to be honest with you. You know, you can see that sort of divide where people talk about their interior design work, and they also talk about sort of recommendations for your average person, which make a little bit more sense for most people. But it's a tightrope you gotta walk, right? Because again, it's a very different customer. A person who hires an interior designer or an architect is probably different than a person who is just sort of redecorating their space, or a renter, or someone who's just trying to make their space a little bit more beautiful. And that's actually more what I try to do. So that's it for this video. I hope you really enjoyed this one. I got a little bit ranty while also giving my usual tips. So let me know what you think. Curious to hear what you think about interior designers and whether they're snobs. And if you're an interior designer, I'd love to hear from you too. And that's it for me. I'll see you on the next video. Thanks. Bye.